Keeping it real.
What it do? This is your brother Bishop of Bishop Zone TV. And today I got an interesting topic for y'all. But before I get into that, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And hey, tell people Bishop Zone TV is here to stay. Shit is hot in these streets, y'all. In these internet streets, not in the real streets. I don't do that type of stuff. All right, let's get into this discussion. It's a hot topic right now. And I gotta talk about it because I'm very familiar with it. So I've been seeing this swarm of anti-Atlanta sentiments on YouTube for the past 3 to 5 years now. And these are people who moved to Atlanta from elsewhere and came to the realization that Atlanta is just not for them. It's not for black people. Now, I lived in Atlanta for 2 years, back in 2015 and 2017. So I think I can speak on this topic very well. And for the most part, I have little to nothing negative to say about Atlanta. Trust me, it's nowhere near perfect, but for the most part, I enjoyed the 2 years of my life living in Atlanta. So because my experiences were completely different than most of these anti-Atlanta demographic type of people you see floating around on YouTube, I gotta give my reasons as to why Atlanta isn't the problem. It's you. Yes, it's your ass. So these are 5 reasons as to why Atlanta's not the problem, but it's you. Let's get into it. Number 1, financially incompetent. Yes. I don't know how many YouTubers I've watched decide to make the bold decision to quit their jobs, pack up their belongings, and move to Atlanta with little to no money, as if moving to Atlanta is going to change everything for you. Atlanta is cheaper than cities like New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, but it ain't cheap, y'all. Atlanta is also a big, sprawling metropolitan area, so prices vary depending on location. Prices will be more expensive in the actual city limits of Atlanta, and if it's cheap in Atlanta city limits, then chances are your ass live in the hood. That's 10 out of 10 times you live in the hood if it's cheap. The nicer the burbs outside the perimeter, the more expensive housing and rent is in those particular suburbs. Now, you can still find some decent prices in suburbs like Lawrenceville or Marietta, but you're going to be in suburbia USA. So you got to understand that you'll be further away from the city limits, further away from the lights, carrying action that you probably want to be, especially if you're in your 20s. But hey, if you can't afford it, then you got to look elsewhere outside of the city limits. So y'all got to understand that if you want that urban, exciting lifestyle, it's going to cost you. That's not just Atlanta. That's in any city. Number 2, God told me so. I don't know how many times I done rolled my eyes off of God put it in my heart to guide me to Atlanta. God told me to do this. God told me to do that. I don't know how many YouTubers I see make these claims only to later regret moving to Atlanta. I'm sorry, but that is the dumbest thing I've heard thus far in reference to moving to Atlanta, which is God told me to do so. God didn't tell your black ass to move to Atlanta. That was your conscience telling you that. God didn't tell you to quit your job and move to Atlanta. That was your lack of patience that told you to move. Atlanta ain't going nowhere. This is not New Orleans that's probably going to disappear by the year 2035, or Miami or some other coastal city due to global warming. Atlanta still will be here. Shouts out to New Orleans and Miami, by the way. No offense. Look, I'm going to keep it real. I remember watching this interview on Atlanta Streets Interview. Y'all check that YouTube out, by the way. It's called Atlanta Streets Interview. Very interesting. But I remember when the brother had interviewed this homeless mother of 2 from Florida. And what stood out for me about this interview was how she felt she needed to struggle in Atlanta because God told her so. Mind you, her husband moved to Atlanta with a job that pays below minimum wage, which By the way, not only was he working a job that was below minimum wage, but she wasn't working at all. And they had 2 kids. 2 goddamn kids. And mind you, they left a more affordable Pensacola, Florida, to pursue living in what they call the promised land. And literally, she said this. Atlanta is the promised land. As much as I love living in ATL, Shawty, or as much as I did love living in Atlanta, it ain't the promised land. And frankly, there is no promised land. There's no Mecca per se in America with 3 Ks. But, and I digress, Atlanta is not the only city where black people can prosper in America. Life is not a Tyler Perry movie, despite the bad wig on your head. So, yes, leave God out of it, all right? Number 3, too many dreamers. It's no secret that one of Atlanta's nicknames, for better or worse, is called the Black Hollywood. Atlanta is probably the 3rd largest entertainment hub outside of New York and LA. And unlike New York and LA, it's still more affordable for the average wannabe rapper, singer, model, actress, actor, or influencer. So, yeah, it will attract a lot of dreamers. The problem is, though, a lot of these dreamers don't make it, and they start to have a negative perception of Atlanta based on their failures. Now, I know I'm going to hurt some feelings with this, but I promise you, I don't know how many times I've seen these YouTubers say, well, I came to Atlanta trying to be an entrepreneur. I didn't have any money, and I was going to sleep on my cousin's couch. And I was selling some incense on the street and some CDs and some DVDs. And I got jacked. I got this, that, and third. So I hate Atlanta, so I'm moving to Charlotte. I'm moving to North Carolina. If you think I'm throwing shots, shouts out to that brother Langston. No shots, but he was one of the people that influenced this video. Because again, I don't see how many people move to Atlanta with no financial, nothing. They don't have any finances. They don't have any money saved up. They don't have no jobs lined up. They didn't move with a job transfer, yet they complain about Atlanta. Look, I'm sorry to tell you. And this is he's not the only one. There is hundreds of thousands of people who want to pursue a career in the industry and fall flat on their face, and they blame it on Atlanta. Look, this is not an Atlanta thing. This is a entertainment industry thing. You have to understand that majority of people who pursue the entertainment industry would not become the next T.I. They would not become the next Beyonce. You won't become the next Tyler Perry. Look, honestly, y'all better off becoming a content creator and making minstrel show-like content, or show off the hooch and the cooch on OnlyFans. Y'all like that little Atlanta game? Y'all need to live in Atlanta for a while to understand the hooch and the cooch. Chattahoochee, I don't know that. I understand. If you don't understand that reference, then you proving my point. You don't get out as much as your small social circle in Atlanta. But understand that most people don't have the work ethic nor the talent to make it in the entertainment industry. That's in general. That's all across the board, no matter if you're in New York or LA. And it's very competitive. It's a very competitive industry. So, again, that's not Atlanta's fault. That is your fault. Number 4, unrealistic expectations. Look, most 20-something-year-olds have unrealistic expectations of cities that are frequently represented on television and film. Atlanta in real life, it's not like the Housewives of Atlanta. It's not a random 21 Savage or 2 Chainz rap video. Ironically, if you want the most accurate depiction of Atlanta, then go watch Childish Gambino's show, Atlanta. Even though it's a show built on surrealism, it's still the most accurate depiction of the city. There's many sides to Atlanta, just like with any major city in America. Yes, there are the finesses. There are the scammers. There are the frauds and the freaks. They do exist in Atlanta. But there's also the nerds. There's the activists. There's the spiritually free brothers and sisters, that has all the incense. They have altars. They put crystals in their water before they drink it. It's kind of weird, but they exist. We also have the outdoorsy people in Atlanta. And we have the regular black man and woman just trying to survive and maintain in America, like everywhere else, in Atlanta. I tell people all the time that Atlanta is surprisingly regular. Yes, it's hella regular. Many transplants wouldn't know that because they seek social scenes that are limited to finesses, scammers, and IG models. I understand. Look, Killer Mike will have your ass believing that Atlanta is some heaven on earth for black folks. That's a homer mentality. Hey, I ain't mad at him, but lower your expectations, especially if you want an urban lifestyle but are making less than six figures. Trust me, you'll enjoy Atlanta accordingly if you just have realistic expectations. And a lot of time, a lot of people who are not financially secure have unrealistic expectations of Atlanta based off of media perception. So, number 5, you. Yes, you're the problem. It's not Atlanta, you're the problem. Look, even though Atlanta has its fair share of problems, just like anywhere else, I'd still rank it pretty high when it comes to opportunities for black people in this country. What I find with most of these YouTubers who really hate Atlanta is that they're not complaining about stuff that actually makes or breaks a city. Let me explain. They're not really complaining about the traffic, the infrastructure, the public education system, or crime. All right, let me dial that back. Maybe they are complaining about the traffic and the crime, which are legitimate gripes. Yes, these are legitimate gripes and concerns about a city, and that's in general. But it's mostly about the finesses, scammers, and dating scene. We talking lifestyle attributes. And I gotta say, that has everything to do with their personality, more so than the city of Atlanta. Look, I'm not a person big on going clubbing. That includes hookah lounges and strip clubs. Matter of fact, when I lived in Atlanta for all of 2 years, I only went to 2 clubs outside of me performing or networking at a show. Yet, I always found stuff to do other than clubbing. Yes, let me say that again. I always found stuff to do in Atlanta outside of clubbing. Look, nobody told your ass to go find your boo at Compound. You go to Tongue and Groove every weekend and complain about Atlanta having a lack of culture. That's not Atlanta's fault. That's you. And what really trips me out about people with this mentality is they end up moving here to Houston doing the same damn exact thing. Clubs, trendy expensive restaurants, hookah lounges, day parties, and bottomless mimosas. When I lived in Atlanta, my Sunday routine was generally hitting up Ponce City Market, running or riding a bike on the Beltline to Piedmont Park, hitting up Savanetta and Little 5 Points. My wife, she would hit up the Crystal Store at Little 5 Points. Then we would get a smoothie and maybe a shot from Arden's Garden. And then I would cop me a comic book or a record at Criminal Records. Now, of course, I did other things, but clubs, hookah lounges, and day parties were less than 5% of my experience living in Atlanta. And I lived in Atlanta for 2 years. So that's not on Atlanta, that's you. In conclusion, the reality is this. A lot of young black people bought into the hype of Atlanta and moved to Atlanta with a sense of entitlement, no skills, and no money. You're not going to make it in most major cities in this country with no skills and no money. Waffle House is always hiring. Trust me, they always hiring. And you better have them hands too when you apply for Waffle House. By the way, I see the same thing happening in real time with so many people flocking their asses to Houston. Biggest difference between Houston and Atlanta, Houston is a smidget cheaper than Atlanta. So they still had that new shoe smell syndrome with Houston. But trust me, y'all, the more people move down here, the more expensive things will get. And eventually, they'll be saying the same thing about Houston that they did with Atlanta. When me and my wife moved to Atlanta, we planned that move a year in advance. We had money saved up. We didn't quit our jobs. We made sure we had job locations in Atlanta we could transfer to. If Atlanta didn't have job locations for us to transfer to, we were not going to move. We visited Atlanta twice for several days to make sure that this was the place we wanted to be. We had a plan, money and goals in line to make our moves and experience for the most part successful. Don't get it twisted, y'all. We had a couple of bumps. That's natural when you move from one city to another. We also had family who helped us along the way. Shouts out especially to my cousin Fred for allowing us his place to stay while we got acquainted with the city and eventually found our own place to live. Again, I'm telling y'all, we were not going to move to Atlanta if we didn't have somewhere to stay. We had to make sure we had all these things set in place for us to move to. Also, shouts out to my homegirl, my hometown homegirl from Longview, Erica, who also hipped us to a lot of games, got us plugged in with a couple of people, and made our visit that much more smoother in an ATL. This is what you got to do, especially in a city like Atlanta, if you want to become successful. The main point I'm trying to make to y'all is this. When you plan properly and you do extensive research on a place, it's hard not to succeed. The only reason we're not living in Atlanta right now is because we had our first child and wanted to be closer to family. That's why we moved back to Houston. In a nutshell, life is what y'all make it. You can easily go back and look at plenty of these YouTubers who were unhappy with Atlanta and find a common theme there. Frankly, in my opinion, while I think Atlanta is a wonderful city to live in, I do believe it's those complaining transplants that have quote unquote ruined Atlanta. So it's a blessing that these complaining transplants up and leave and move elsewhere. Y'all gotta respect the local culture. Even if you don't like the city, respect the locals. By the way, these transplants need to stop moving their asses to H-Town. Please stop moving y'all asses to Houston. I beg of thee. I beg of thee. Hey, Dallas is open for business. Y'all move up there. But don't move to Houston. With that said, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, holla.